In Big Brother, we all have a pretty good idea of who the all-time greatest players are. Dan, Dr. Will, Derek, Maggie, maybe even June, Andy, Cody, and of course, Josh Martinez. But there's something these players all have in common. They're all winners. Winning the game is what separates these players from other legends of the show, but how far away were those other legends from actually winning? Well, let's take a look. I've studied Big Brother up and down for a long time, and I've concocted a list of moves of key specific moments in the game that was the main reason that these legends lost, and how, if they would have done something a bit differently at these moments, it could have made some of these all-time great players into all-time great winners. However, one criteria I made is that these are moves that realistically could have been made or avoided to grant them the win. I will not be including things like, oh, if only they had won the final HOH, because that's not a realistic change. Or for a more specific example, saying, oh, if only they had evicted their ride or die at the final hour, even though they displayed extreme loyalty throughout the entire game, because that's not something that is realistic, given what we saw about so-and-so's game. Only realistic changes will be talked about because it makes it that much more enticing to realize that these players were one legitimately close move away from winning the entire game. And without further ado, let's get started.
He's playing comparable to Vanessa Rousso, Derek from season 16. I might be jumping the gun, but even Dan Gheesling, he has worked this whole house. So I gotta let my girl Crispen know that we gotta keep our eye on him.
The first person I have on this list is Danielle Reyes, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. Letting Jason evict Amy over Lisa at the Final Four. This one is kind of a bit of a stretch because Danielle was planning on going to the end with Jason given the opportunity anyways, but having Amy be the one evicted over Lisa cost Danielle any chance at the win. I understand that they thought Lisa would be easier to beat in the competitions, and hindsight is 2020, but this is where we can absolutely pinpoint where Danielle lost for sure, because Danielle might be able to beat Amy in the end. And to go along with this, Jason Guy, I have the same issue. Him evicting Amy over Lisa cost Jason the game. I believe that Jason or Danielle would have beaten Amy at that final HOH. And if that happens, well, Jason wins the game. So yeah, Jason, I'm going to say this is your move too.
She is an amazing competitor. It was just a decision of who did we feel like we might have a little bit better chance of winning against when it comes to games.
I love Amy deeply, but I have a loyalty to Jason more than anything, and second is Lisa.
Next up, I know I've been talking about Big Brother legends, and this person is not a Big Brother great, but I thought I would mention this anyways. If Ivette threw the final HOH to Janelle in Big Brother 6, inconspicuously, of course, then Janelle evicts Maggie over Ivette, and then it's likely that Ivette beats Janelle in a vote of 4-3 to win the game. I know April has said that she thinks she would have voted for Janelle to win, which would give Janelle the victory, but I find it hard to believe that she votes for Janelle to win for certain. I'd say it's like 50-50, but for Ivette, that's better odds than she had in the actual timeline. So if she just threw that final HOH instead of going to a double tiebreaker, Ivette very well could be the winner of Big Brother 6.
And 97. Congratulations, Ivette. You are the final head of household.
I'd like you to tell me why I shouldn't vote for Maggie.
I can't give you one reason why not. I can never give you a reason why not to vote for her.
Vettiberg, it's Howie.
Next up, we have Dr. Will from Big Brother All-Stars. I'm not saying that this was the right move for Will to make in the grand scheme of things, but in terms of Big Brother, had he given in and kissed Janelle and given into the showmance at the end game, it's likely that Janelle doesn't have that fight in her to evict Will at the Final Four. And Will then gets to the Final Three with both of the other two players taking Will to the end, where Will win handily, becoming the first two-time winner of Big Brother. Obviously, it all worked out for Will in the end because the woman that Will was dating during Big Brother All-Stars is now his wife. So I think Will made the right decision for his life, but in Big Brother, he could have been a two-time winner. So you choose which one is the better outcome.
I have a boyfriend.
I have a girlfriend.
I'm not into you, Will.
Not into you, Janelle.
I'm ticklish.
Next, I've got Eric Stein. And this one is more of a joke answer, but Eric Stein's move that he could have made to help him win the game is just not accepting being America's player. That's legitimately the most likely way that Eric wins the game, as Eric literally could not win the game as America's player unless he won out from the final 5 onwards. Like I said, this is more of a joke answer than anything, because realistically, there was nothing that Eric could do as America's player in order to win the game, but he displayed that he had the strategic acumen and the awareness to be a Big Brother winner in that house. And even as America's player, he did everything he could outside of winning out. So even though it's a joke, Eric very well could have been a winner of Big Brother if he wasn't America's player.
Oh my god. In order to accomplish this task, you must kiss the house guest America has chosen for you. Who is it? Come on, evil Dick. I know you're in there. Oh, perfect. Dick. Oh my god. The American people, they're taking great care of me. Well, I've already completed this task on my own terms, but I'm happy to do it again.
Now, we're going to jump ahead a little bit, and we're going to get to Dan from Big Brother 14. I know many say that he could never have won, but not taking the shot at Shane during the final 6 double eviction cost him for certain. Dan's chances of winning the game were slim to none as it was, but they would definitely be increased by sitting next to one of Jen or Joe. But by allowing Shane to stay at the final 6, he got rid of Joe and then had to sit by, and he really couldn't do anything as Jen was evicted the next week in 5th place, which all but guaranteed Dan's loss.
Ian just won the veto. I wanted him out. Now I can't get him out. Now I gotta pick off someone else on the list, and it looks like it may be the physical threat Shane. I actually trust Danielle when she says Shane isn't going to put me up and he's not going to backstab me, so she saves her boyfriend for this 1 week. But you know what, Danielle? Shane's time is coming, and when I need you to cut the cord, I'm handing you the scissors.
All right, next one's another big one. We've got Vanessa Rousso on Big Brother 17. Obviously, one thing you could say is evicting Austin over Steve at the final 5 was her biggest mistake, but that's not what I think. I think one move that cost Vanessa the win was her winning part 1 of the final HOH, and here's why. Vanessa knew that Liz was going to take her to the final 2 if Liz won the final HOH. Steve was out first in part 1 of the final HOH, so Vanessa, being the poker player that she is, could have figured out the game theory in this situation and thrown part 1 to Liz. Vanessa probably figured that Steve was going to beat Liz in part 2, meaning that it would be a showdown between Vanessa and Steve in part 3, with the winner evicting the other one. However, Vanessa proved to be a slightly better competitor than Steve throughout the season, so I would say that Vanessa would have the upper hand over Steve in part 2. Based on this logic, Vanessa would theoretically have a much higher probability of having both herself and Liz in part 3 of the HOH if Vanessa gave Liz the win in part 1 and then she took on Steve in part 2. If successful, then she would have both herself and Liz in part 3 of the final HOH, which guarantees that one of them wins it, evicts Steve, and then Vanessa is in the final 2 and wins the game. Don't get me wrong, I totally get why Vanessa didn't do this, but I think we very well could have had a different winner of Big Brother 17 had Vanessa thrown part 1 to Liz.
That's as physical as I get. I don't move. You have a way better shot in the next round. Okay.
Vanessa wins!
Alright, now we have Paul, the first time in Big Brother 18. Their biggest mistake was not bringing James, obviously. For real though, I actually don't think that there's that much that Paul could have done to get the win, as they truly thought that James would win over them. Paul obviously lost to Nicole, Paul pretty likely loses to Corey, and Paul also loses to Victor. So Paul was in a real tough spot at the end of Big Brother 18, and likely couldn't have done anything outside of taking James to the end to win.
It is now up to you to decide whom you would like to evict and whom you want to sit next to. When you face the jury later tonight, Paul, I'll be back in just a few moments.
You know, we're not done with Paul yet, because now we're going to talk about Paul's second chance in Big Brother 19. Paul not owning up to Jason's jury question in the end definitely cost them the win. Jason was still willing to vote for Paul up until that point. Jason had even stated that even through everything, he was able to recognize Paul's absolute dominance in the game, and if Paul were to totally come clean during the final 2 questions, then he would be willing to vote for Paul, giving them a 5-4 victory over Josh. It's not a guarantee, but this is something that Paul could have done at the last hour during the jury questioning to give themselves the win. But thank God they didn't, because we got the Josh win, baby! Woohoo!
Paul, it seems like you made moves throughout the game with the goal of avoiding making enemies in the jury. Why unnecessarily lie to our faces days and hours before we were going to the jury?
You know, if the house wanted a certain target out and I was outnumbered, I couldn't necessarily help that individual.
Another great that could have won is Tyler. Tyler's biggest mistake was throwing that Final Four veto. He needs Angela in the end to win, and he has the perfect reason to bring her along. Many will say that Tyler's treatment of Bailey cost him the game, but based on what I saw from the challenge, Bailey was likely going to vote for Casey regardless because of the close relationship that Bailey thought they had in the beginning of the game. I'm not saying that Tyler could have won that veto even if he tried, because Casey was an absolute beast, but allowing it to be up to chance instead of giving it his all and trying to keep Angela safe is what cost him the win 100%, because he loses to both Casey and JC in the final two. But one thing that he 100% could have done was backdooring Casey during the final 6 double eviction. He was HOH, the veto was used, and he had the votes. He could have gotten rid of Casey. And it wouldn't have even killed his positioning that much. He still 99% guarantee makes the final 2, and as long as he isn't next to JC, Tyler probably gets the win. So that is another moment where Tyler could have won the game, but he chose not to.
Oh my God! What the hell?
Somebody has gone through the effort to take every mattress we have and stuff it in there.
Who did this?
I'm gonna investigate, but I can't because there's 19 mattresses in here.
From Big Brother 21, I've got a little bit of a duo here. I've got Cliff and Nicole. Again, they're not all-time greats, but evicting Holly at the final 5 is without a doubt the move that they needed to do, and instead, keeping Holly around guaranteed zero money for either of them. Tommy promised that he would throw the Final Four HOH if they kept him, and I'm inclined to believe that Tommy sticks to his word. That means that Nicole wins the Final Four HOH once more, and at this point, Tommy and Jackson are almost guaranteed to be voting the other one out when one of them wins the final veto of the summer, which then means that Cliff is also guaranteed to be in the Final 3 alongside Nicole. So now this means that Cliff and Nicole would be in the Final 3 with one of Jackson or Tommy, and I personally believe that it would be in their best interest to throw part 2 to Cliff and to let Cliff take on whichever of Jackson or Tommy won part 1. I feel that Cliff could have gone 8 for 8 on the questions just as Jackson had, and then it would be a matter of Cliff winning the tiebreaker to guarantee a Cliff and Nicole final 2 where one of them would then win the game with the other one taking home the less fun but still nice second place prize.
Nicole, they are breaking all apart as we speak, the 6.
I've been saying, give enough time and these couples are gonna go after each other. And guess what? They're doing it!
I've got one more person, one more great that could have potentially won the game, and it's Tiffany Mitchell from Big Brother 23. And this one's a tough one to talk about because there isn't actually a realistic change that Tiffany could have made in order to win the game. The cause was way more important to her than the win, so this is not something that's actually realistic, but let's toy around with the idea anyways. At the final 8, Alyssa won the veto, and Tiffany had to nominate Claire for eviction next to Xavier. However, if Tiffany nominated Kyland instead of Claire, Kyland likely gets evicted, which takes out a huge endgame threat. Hannah probably wins the double eviction HOH again next round. She nominates Xavier and Alyssa. Xavier wins the veto, and let's just assume that Alyssa still goes home. So now instead of the final 6 being all the cookout members, it's all of the cookout, but replace Claire with Kyland. The final 6 HOH then begins, and without Kyland, the winner is probably Big D. Crazy. Big D probably nominates some conglomerate of Tiffany, Hannah, and Claire. Then the veto happens, and guess what? Big D wins again! What is going on? So at this point, it looks like Claire probably goes home if the other players of the cookout are still pro-cookout. But then this brings us to the final 5. If Tiffany can manage to win the HOH over Azah or Xavier, then Tiffany has a shot at keeping Hannah in the game and getting rid of Xavier if they can beat him in the veto as well. But Tiffany would have to be the one to beat Xavier from what we saw. At this point, if Tiffany could potentially get Xavier out at the final 5, I am confident that Tiffany and Hannah could win out against Azah and Big D and both be sitting at the end where Tiffany probably gets the win. But again, all of this depends on if Tiffany could win the competitions at the final 5. If so, Tiffany can win the game. If not, Xavier probably still wins. It's a big hypothetical, but I'm just having some fun here on the last one.
But this was fun. It was fun to get us here.
Yeah.
We definitely have accomplished a lot. Getting the 6 of us here, moving as covertly as we did, and what we did was guarantee that there will be 2 African Americans sitting in those final 2 seats. One of them will be crowned the first African American winner of Big Brother.
And that's it for this video. Some Big Brother legends were a lot closer to the win than people may think, and if they just made one little change in their game, they could be a whole lot richer. These are just my opinions though, and if you disagree with my thoughts or have some thoughts of your own, please leave them down in the comments. I'm very interested in hearing your takes. Shout out to my YouTube members for supporting me just a little bit extra. It means a lot to me and keeps me motivated to put out content every week. If you made it this far, consider subscribing yourself because it helps me out, and more importantly, it's free. And as always, here's a clip for you on your way out.
This is going to be fun. And I'm like, woo! Are you ready to play BB Comics? Yes, I am. And I'm like, woo!